I don't know what's going on with my hair. You're going to have to come to terms with this, I think. It seems to be the case that the writers for the Canadian sitcom are running out of ideas. They're just repeating the same episodes over and over and over again. You might be asking yourself if you've seen this episode before, and you probably have. But to give you a little bit of context, on August 13th, the CUPE, or the Canadian Union of Public Sector Employees? On August 13th, the CUPE branch that represents Air Canada's flight attendants gave its 3-day notice to Canada's flag carrier, stating that they planned on going on strike on 1 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on the 16th if they were not given a deal they deemed suitable. And then nothing happened. And of course, on the 16th, more than 10,000 flight attendants went on strike and were subsequently locked out. Now, this sparked a reaction from Canada's Minister of Jobs, Patty Hajdu, who urged the two to reach a deal. However, with the clear implication that the union had to reach a deal more than Air Canada did, saying the union said themselves that many of their demands have been met. However, right now, they're not at the table. And it's very important that both the union and the corporation return to the table, roll up their sleeves, and finish the deal. Now, I'm not going to go on some like Jagmeet Singh rant where I talk about how crazy it is the government changed the name of the position from labor to jobs. But I will say that it's kind of funny that the way she's speaking about reaching a deal is very like blue collar orientated. The first thing that struck out to me was when she posted her official statement to Twitter saying that both parties had to work harder to get a deal. That's funny. And of course, the earlier comments about how the union and the corporation have to just roll up their sleeves and reach a deal. Now, me personally, my opinions on the matter is that I think both sides should start thinking about reaching a deal and stop thinking about being such stupid poor people who are smelly and poor. And I think that both sides should realize that you're just too goddamn stupid. You should be thankful you have any type of job at all. With more than 10,000 flight attendants on strike, 130,000 customers told to come back another time, and 700 flights a day potentially in jeopardy, both sides dug in for a brutal war ready to come. And then after only 12 hours of striking, they were forced back to work. I'm not being serious. I have a quote here, which I think is quite funny to illustrate the humanity of the situation. Someone said, "To legislate us back to work 12 hours after we started? I'm sorry. Snowstorms have shut down Air Canada for longer than we were allowed to strike." Which is true. And then after only 12 hours of striking, they were told by the government to go back to work. Like now. And the union had a binding arbitration imposed on them. Inshallah. Which, if you don't know what binding arbitration means, it's just when a bunch of lawyers quibble and argue about useless shit for months or years. Now, I'm a little dumb idiot boy, and so what do I know? But in my opinion, I think it's ridiculous that a government can force you to go back to work. If I want to walk, I should be allowed to walk, okay? No matter the circumstance. Except in a few circumstances. Of course, I'm completely fine with like forcing flight attendants to work so that Canadians abroad can like get back home. Air Canada said that due to the strike, 25,000 Canadians would be stranded abroad daily. That's bad. But besides that, I think this is pretty ridiculous. And I would think that the union already has something like that figured out. I'm too lazy to check, but yeah. But something that we're learning about as of a few hours ago is that to the time I'm recording this, the union has decided that, nah, they're going to go on strike anyway, pulling a Donnie Azov from the Wolf of Wall Street. Base. Now, going into the actual specifics of what kind of deal was being proposed, I think is really interesting. The first thing I found was Air Canada's post titled "Air Canada Provides Clarity on its Offer to CUPE," posted on the 14th of August. And basically all the post says is like some specifics of the deal, stating, under the proposal, which seeks no concessions, there is a 38% increase in total compensation over 4 years and an agreement from everyone watching this video that they'll subscribe and join the Discord channel, link in the description, and a new provision for ground pay that is industry leading in Canada. Hourly rates would go as high as $94 an hour in the first year. Hourly pay would increase by 12 to 16% in the first year. This consists of a combined 8% increase in the hourly wage, plus another 4 to 8% increase through a new ground pay formula in the first year alone. By 2027, senior flight attendants would earn $87,000 a year annually on average, and 20% of flight attendants would earn $90,000 or more. There would be significant improvements to health benefits and pension plans, including the Legacy Defined Benefit Pension Plan. Air Canada is the only airline in the country to offer its flight attendants access to a pension that includes a defined benefit component. I don't know, okay. Meaningful quality of life improvements, including an increase to paid vacation and measures to address union concerns about rest and work-life balance. This includes changes to crew complement on aircraft to reduce in-flight workloads. We all know what that means, right? It will make Air Canada flight attendants the best compensated in Canada. Already, cabin crew earn up to $17 more per hour than the counterparts at the company's largest domestic competitor. Now, honest to God, reading that, my eyes popped out of my skull because that seemed like an incredibly lucrative job. me on my way to scab for Air Canada. But the two things I was able to pick up on that are apparently BS are the first 2 points. Now, for those who don't know, which was definitely not me 2 minutes ago, in the airline industry, it is industry standard to get paid the second the door closes on the plane. Now that sounds like a good thing, except it isn't, because a ton of things have to be done before the plane takes off and after it lands by flight attendants called groundwork. And not only that, but doing a little bit of detective work, I cross-referenced the things that I read in the CBC article and typed that into Google search bar with the word Reddit at the end. Now shout out to this one person because he made a really interesting comment saying he's a former AC flight attendant. Just for those who aren't in the know, that's slang for Air Canada. Just saying that it would be reasonable for Air Canada to just pay 50% of wages for groundwork, which would result in a 10-year veteran making $30 an hour for said groundwork. But also, arguably more importantly, saying how I totally agree that they should get a raise, but the low end needs a much bigger boost than the high end. Entry-level pay is so low that it's only livable if you stay at home with your parents. And so again, back to those 2 points from earlier, it's starting to make a lot more sense. The first ever major US airline to offer to pay for groundwork happened in 2022 with Delta Airlines. I'm being serious. Since then, a few US airlines have had similar concessions, and in Canada, Porter Airlines and Paskin Aviation, 2 airlines I've literally never heard of before, ever. Maybe, I don't know. Already had deals where they pay flight attendants for work during the boarding process. So that industry-leading pay is more of a testament to the industry part of that than the leading pay part of that. Especially when considering that CUPE has estimated that Air Canada flight attendants perform 35 hours of unpaid groundwork a month, which is almost a whole ass week of work where they're not getting paid. And tallying that up, CUPE claims that a bunch of their workers, especially near the entry level, were making less than minimum wage. And I say entry level because that potentially $94 an hour is probably like winning something from a claw machine, considering that per the Reddit guy's math, a 10-year veteran makes $60 an hour, let alone potentially $94 an hour in the first year. I doubt that, me personally, but what do I know? Maybe there's some guy who got it. Who knows? Anyway, anyone who is paying attention and not watching this on a second monitor, I know some of you are doing that, would realize that the Canadian Parliament isn't even in session right now, meaning they literally cannot pass any law saying you better get the fuck back to work. They can't do that, which might lead you to wonder, okay, how are they being forced back into work? Well, that would be the incredible Section 107 of the Canadian Labour Code, which gives the right to the Minister of Jobs to completely stop any strike and impose arbitration so long as you need to maintain or secure industrial peace. I'm sorry, I beg your pardon. Isn't the whole point of a strike to not have industrial peace? I mean, you could argue that there's a whole bunch of industrial peace happening in that building that everyone is not inside right now. Anyway, the reason for this video is because I wanted to tell you this and inform you on a problem that is getting increasingly evident, mostly with the liberals. But because of the circumstances that have been laid out to me, maybe I'm wrong, but if you're a crown corporation in the Canadian economy, why wouldn't you just never, ever reach a deal? And then just eventually have the government swoop in, Section 107, those dumbasses on the picket line, going through months to potentially years of binding arbitration, and worst case scenario, you have to meet the demands completely of the union, but you get to skip out on paying those for like the entire time of the arbitration. Why wouldn't you do that? Unions are already taking the federal government to court on this. One stating that this is unconstitutional, where it will most likely go to the Supreme Court. But don't worry, everyone. The Supreme Court made sure to take a break from not giving a fuck professionally about anything ever to say to workers, oh, you think this law is unconstitutional? Good luck with that. And they went right back to not giving a fuck. Now I'm going to say something that I think is the most fire line I have ever cooked up ever. So I'm going to need all of you guys to get your soy jacks ready and then get ready to post a comment with a timestamp to this part of the video. It is becoming increasingly evident that Air Canada has a failure to launch problem. I learned this recently, but apparently at one point, Air Canada was actually publicly held, and it was a Canadian company, like owned by the government, which is sick, and just was eventually privatized and sold off by Jean Chrétien in 1995. God damn it. You're lucky you're a cutie patootie, Jean Chrétien. But if the child that is Air Canada has supposedly left the nest and spread its wings to go be with all the rich people in the airline industry, all minus 2 of them, then how come it keeps coming back home to mommy and daddy and try to get them to force all the other kids to keep playing with them? Like, all right, I get Canada Post, right? I thought their demands were stupid because Canada Post didn't have any money, and then the union solutions to the problem of Canada Post not having any goddamn money were some of the most bullshit kindergarten, I was gonna say the Arsenal there, I said it anyway, things I've ever seen, maybe in my entire life, actually. This is some of the dumbest things I've ever heard in my life. But hey, if you want to force Canada Post workers to go back to work, why not? At least it's a corporation that is kind of owned by the Canadian government. I get doing that. I get why a government would do that. Why would we do it for Air Canada? It's so cringe that this keeps happening, and there's like probably no way out. Apparently in 2024, Air Canada went to the government because of a dispute with the Airline Pilots Union, telling the government to be ready to step in before the two sides eventually reached a deal. I'm sorry. Be prepared to step in? Be prepared to step in. What are you, afraid of all the people you don't pay being angry with you? What the fuck is the matter? Go handle that shit on your own. Anyway, shout out to all the members. Here, I'm working on a better way to integrate them into the outro. Watch the video on screen now. I worked really hard on it, and it did horribly. And most importantly, the best way to support me is to join the Discord. Link down below. Bye-bye.